I'm the type of person, if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I'm gonna tell you that I don't know. But I bet you what? I know how to find the answer, and I will find the answer.
Alright, do you even McCorge? It is, of course, Irish for a very warm welcome, my friends, to Shammocks and Shanks. Another episode where we get to learn from some of the best professionals in the golf world. Now, very excited about today's episode because I have a good friend of mine called Jason Sutton on the show, and Jason's Director of Instruction at Colleton River in Bluffton, South Carolina. He's also one of the top coaches in the game of golf, working with elite amateurs, college players and professionals across many different tours. The Golf Digest Top 100 coach and the recent recipient of the PGA Carolina Section Top Golf Professional Award. Jason's expertise speaks for itself. Now, this episode is packed with practical insights. In my opinion, it's probably the best one we've done from that perspective. And Jason starts with a detailed discussion on putting, providing actionable advice for club golfers to not just improve their strokes, but to create a focus on development of other putting skills like green reading and speed judgment. We also explore how students can maximize lessons by asking the right questions and fostering a collaborative learning environment between player and coach. From there, Jason shares his philosophy on chipping, analyzes the short game to his tour players, and walks us through their full swing actions, explaining not only what they worked on or have been working on, but also what he left intentionally unchanged. It becomes very evident that his clear focus is on helping players achieve their ball flight goals and not changing aesthetics for self-promotion. He relies on fusing his vast knowledge and experience while actively listening to his players to create their idea of success. Jason is not only one of my closest friends, but also a mentor to me and many others in the golf world. His willingness to use his journey, including both triumphs and missteps, while giving feedback and advice is what makes him not only a great friend to many, but a mentor to a lot as well. His dedication to teaching and mentoring, paired with his own growth mindset, inspires both his students and fellow coaches. Indeed, his work on the Golf Guru podcast has been a learning resort for countless people, including myself, for these past number of years. Jim Rohn once said, "Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development," and I can think of no finer example of that in our game than Jason. He is a man dedicated to his craft, who gives far more than he receives, and who has earned the respect of the golf coaching world while doing it all. If what Jim says is true, then I've no doubt that Jason will become a familiar name to many, many more in the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, Jason Sutton. All right, Jason Sutton, very warm welcome back in the podcast. You were on a long time ago. It's nearly like 2 years now. So
Gosh,
I've been really, really eager to get you back on because so much has happened for you professionally. Obviously, kind of our relationship has developed in those 2 years. We kind of got a lot closer in terms of what we teach, what we're learning. So this is just going to be a real, real fun one for me to have you on here. And the last time you were on, we focused more on personal development and so forth. And I really wanted to get you back on because I want to talk about the technical aspects of things. Now, I've seen you in person coaching, which is a fantastic experience. But I've also seen over the last year, your players starting to get a little bit more notoriety, starting to kind of move up on those circuits. And that's been fantastic to see you develop that way. And I just thought it'd be a great way to get you on, get into the technical side of things, the way your brain works, how you see things, because a lot of your players, we have some idiosyncratic actions, which I think are going to help club golfers, help coaches. But let's start off with what's been going on recently in the last couple of weeks with yourself, because we've had some news, some good news. So if you want to explain to the listeners just that good news you've heard in the last couple of weeks and the exciting things you have coming up in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months.
well, thanks for having me back on. I was beginning to wonder whether we are going to get this done and whether I pissed you off or something. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're
But
good.
no, I'm just messing with you. No, it's been great to our relationship has grown, and I'm living vicariously through your travels and your experiences with other top coaches. So we're kind of learning from each other, which is awesome. So thanks for having me back on. But you can tell them the news. It's officially out today. But
Okay.
you can drop
All
the
right. So
award
so your area is the Carolinas PGA. That's where you're
the
attached to.
section. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
section.
section. Yeah.
And they have certain awards that most sections do every year. And one of those awards is Coach of the Year, and the other one is Club Professional of the Year. And this year, you have actually won the Club Professional Award, which is,
Right.
I think, one of the first times, if not the first time, that's happened to a person who's a full-time coach. And
Yes.
you've also, on top of that, or previous to that, been nominated to actually go speak at the Top 100 Summit, and that's coming up soon. So
Yeah.
a lot of nice recognition. And we talked a little bit before the show started. Like, we don't really do this for the awards, but when you put as much of yourself into your craft, into helping people develop, like the hours, the energy, the money, the intellect. It's nice to get that recognition. So, how do you feel about that award, first off, for your section? And then, obviously, with the top
Yeah.
100 coming up, how do you feel about that too?
Yeah, it's a huge honor to win Golf Professional of the Year because, like you said, it's not. Uh, it was definitely not on my bingo card, as we say,
Okay.
because it's usually a director of golf or a head professional that wins it. But I got to give a lot of thanks to some of my colleagues that one nominated me, some other teachers that sort of recognize that, a teaching professional that's sort of poured into the section for as long as I have, because it's not just about this year, it's about my entire career or nearly 20 some years in the section of the stuff that I've done, whether it's, providing educational opportunities, all the workshops that I've done over the years, presenting, mentoring that we've talked about a lot, going back to the other podcast and things that, me helping you out in your career and so many other people. That's really the gist of it. And it's nice. And I'm really proud of our section for sort of, we call breaking the glass ceiling of being the first. I'm not here to make history, but yeah, it was pretty cool because I won the Strauss Award last year. I won Teacher of the Year and then the Horton Smith Award a few years ago. So I think I'm done with the awards, right? This is kind of the pinnacle
You're gonna have to make up
of,
a new one next year, Greg.
yeah, no, it's just, I was like, I really, when I got the call, I was really, really excited. I knew I had a chance, but didn't know if it would actually happen. Um, yeah, it's just really, really grateful to represent my section, which I think is the best section in the country. We're the largest section in the country, North Carolina, South Carolina. So it's incredible. I mean, I think I told you before we started recording, I was in tears, at some point after hearing about it, because you just get this flood of emotion of, not that we want to be, win awards like you said, but it's nice to be recognized for all the stuff that we've been through, the failures and the successes, and just for me, it's just having a servant attitude and helping other people, which has been my mindset for, since I got into this section and really into the business. So yeah, it's super cool. Um, like we talked about earlier, like now I'm like trying to figure out like what am I going to say in my speech? Like I get ahead of myself. But as far as the top 100, yeah, it's that another one that was not on my radar. It's an honor to get to present next week down in Florida. I'm going to do some putting stuff. We're doing it all outdoors this year, which is going to be really cool, like kind of a live lesson slash, application focused seminars. So I think that's going to be really, really good. So yeah, another just bucket list that, you don't ask for, you just get lucky. And it's been a heck of a year. I mean, I told this, I think, to somebody the other day. I think I was talking to Jason Bellotti, my Streezy guy, and one of my business partners. We did a podcast late last year. We were talking about not so much resolutions, but just goals or like what we would like to accomplish in 2024. And it's just amazing when you put these things out into the universe and you have a sort of a direction that you're moving in, whether it's just getting better at whatever you're doing, that good things start to happen. It's just, when I found out the news about the Golf Professional of the Year, I called Jason and I was like, dude, you're not going to believe this. And pretty much everything we talked about has come to fruition. Like it's manifested itself. And I don't know. I'm blown away. I mean, I feel like I don't deserve it. My imposter syndrome kicks in and goes, what's going on? But also it makes you appreciate all the things that a lot of people have done for me along the way, which is, the list is long. And then for me, it motivates me to do more, right? It's like, I remember after I got on the top 100 list, one, I was like super excited, but then I'm like, okay, now I've got to validate. And so I'm like, you got to have that second win. Like you got to
Yeah.
validate yourself and go, all
Second
right.
major is always the hardest.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Then you're like, okay, now I got to kind of prove myself. So that's always what gets me out of bed in the morning. And So now it's like I don't feel. I mean, I'm not that old, so it's like, what am I going to do next? So I'm excited. I'm excited for the future.
Yeah, I think we were texting when you told me about that a couple of days ago, and I said to you, to me, in looking at your development, your career over the last couple of years, with said with no disrespect to what you would achieve to this point, I said to you, for me, I'm just getting that vibe that you're nearly just getting onto like the first or second rung of a really tall ladder. You know what I mean? And
I
that
hope
just
so.
that momentum is just starting to, and it's great for other coaches. I remember texting Mark Blackburn a couple of years ago after he won for PGA Coach of the
National.
Year. Yeah,
Yep.
national. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I said to him, I just want to thank you for doing it the right way. It's not glitz, it's not glamour. You just do the hard work. And when other coaches see that and they go, you know what, I can do this and I can do it the right way. I don't need to be, maybe displaying things or kind of faking things in
Sure.
a one. I can put in the hard yards, hard graft, and it will come around. It'll be great recognition. And we must also mention, obviously, a good friend of ours, Sean Kennedy, also
Yeah.
won an award for in your section. So I think he won
Yeah.
coach of the year.
Teacher of the year. Yeah.
Teacher
I
of the
mean,
year,
it's
yeah.
yeah. It's just it's so cool because again, like he should have won years ago. I mean,
Hmm.
he's just a fantastic coach, but a lot of times, the way these things work and whether you don't sell yourself enough in the application, which we've
Hmm.
kind of gotten onto in the last few years. I'm like, man, you deserve this award. Let's get you in there. And so excited that he won. And then my boss, Eric Schultz, won Straussball Award, which is what won last year. So it's gonna be a really fun celebration at the awards dinner with
Yeah.
so many of like my colleagues and mentors. And yeah, it's funny how things work. But I mean, it's like I just hope, the more I think about this, again, being the first teaching professional to win the award in our section. I don't know about the other sections, but hopefully this inspires other young teaching professionals to do more and to give more, and kind of opens doors that this is possible, because I never ever thought it was possible that I could win this award until like my friend Robbie Fritz nominated me a couple of years ago and sort of broke it down for me, and was very, very nice to say that. And then here it is, and I'm still shocked. I still can't believe it.
Yeah. So some might say the reason Sean won this year was because he was on the show earlier on Shamrocks and
I
Shanks.
mean,
But I don't
100%.
know whether there's truth to that or not. We're just,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll
I
just
can't
put that out
wait. I
there.
can't wait after my second time on the show. What's going to
Uh,
happen?
yeah, absolutely. You'll be at Augusta next year.
Yeah, let's
Um,
hope.
all right. So obviously, you know the show. You're familiar with the pattern of the format. We kind of go first half. How can we help those club players with your
Hmm.
information, your knowledge? So let's go there first, and then let's jump into your players. And I think there's going to be a show where everybody's going to learn from every section, which is great. That's the ideal goal. So let's get straight into what's happened over, say, the last year in golf instruction. There's been a lot of new information, or maybe different ways of phrasing new information. Let's put it that way. Different
Hmm.
perspectives put out into the golf coaching atmosphere. Um, what's something that you kind of been very, or it's piqued your interest this year, or something that maybe you've learned or had to look at in a different way? And I know you got the smart to move plate, so you've kind of
Right.
gone a little bit down that route. So maybe just
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how you found the year from a learning or investigative golf coaching side.
Yeah. I mean, we've been studying ground reaction forces for a long time, right? I mean, and it's cool to have. And I had body track in the past, which was fine for that time. But smart to move has been a really good measuring device for me. And a lot of times when you start adding technology to your teaching, a lot of times the amateurs or the club players think that that's too technical for me, or that's not for me. But I've found it to be super helpful for even my members and all levels, all skill levels, to where you can get them on the plates. And it again, it's up to the coach to give that player and the level of that player and what you think they can handle the information and what not to give them, right? It's like you can
Mm-hmm.
overwhelm them with a lot of graphs and a lot of different things with the forces that it measures, but I can put an average golfer on there and just show them sort of the biofeedback of like where the pressure is at setup or how they're moving, and watch the traces and do something really, really simple like that and
Mm-hmm.
help them immediately. So it's it's been good. I mean, I've got a great relationship with the Smart to Move guys. I'm actually having Dr. Tyler on my podcast in a couple of days
Oh,
to
great.
kind of dig into it. But that's probably been the biggest thing. I mean, there's so many things. We're always learning, right? I mean, gosh, I could go down so many different rabbit holes. Um, my philosophy, I wouldn't say has changed much. It's just trying to figure out new ways to get people to change and improve is what I'm always trying to do.
Mhm.
And it never, I know this is for the club golfer, so it never ceases to amaze me of how important intention is in golf. And you could apply that to all parts of the game. But let's just say full swing. Um, Whether you're trying to make some kind of swing change or some kind of pattern change or whatever it is your goal is in that lesson, is getting them to change their mindset on whatever they're trying to picture as far as the shot shape or the target. I mean, that is going to always precede force and movement. So, I mean, I can't explain how important that is because most people are just thinking about 1,000 different things and they don't really have an intent or a plan on really what they're trying to get the golf ball to do, and then kind of working themselves back from that. So, I mean, that's a broad sort of spectrum, but
Mhm.
it seems so simple. But I've seen it help and change the dynamic of a lesson that I'm giving to an average golfer or one of my members in a heartbeat just because of changing their mindset or changing their intent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think changing the understanding of what they perceive they should be doing
Yeah,
obviously is going to change.
concepts, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, intent,
huge.
concept. I mean, all these are sort of, words that we use a lot, but I mean, until you sort of piece those things together, I think making a movement change or a, different feel or a pattern, it always has to start with intent.
Mhm. When you've seen and you've used these plates,
Hmm.
what's the big challenge you've seen in the club golfers more predominantly? Is it still, when you're looking at how they move, a rotational issue? Is it more of a lateral side to side issue? What's the kind of fault that you've seen popping up again and again now that you have access to the actual data versus the 2D perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say it's two things. One is setup, because I see my average golfers or just golfers in general, even
Mm,
good players, struggle with where the pressure is with toe versus heel.
okay.
Right. So I like to see the pressure. I see most of them, I see either they get too far from the ball and then they're too much out in over their skis, as Scott Calx would say,
Yeah.
um, too much in their toes, as opposed to I like to see them just behind the balls of their feet. Right. So they kind of get some balance and give themselves an opportunity to move.
Hmm.
And then laterally, I see most players that struggle with ball striking have too much pressure in their trail side at address. So we know that, again, the swing starts before the club moves, as we've
Hmm.
learned from a lot of smart people like James Lights. So the best players that I see, they always have a little pressure in that lead side, whether it's a trigger move to kind of push into that lead side before the swing starts, or they're already a little bit in that lead side. So that's where when I put the picture up, I use a big TV where the plates, and I'll just put their feet up, and I'm like, all right, just stand on it and move around a little bit. They'll start to notice that what they felt like maybe was 50-50 was like 65-70 on the right side or trail
Hmm.
side. And I was like, well, let's try to even that out. So it gives them some awareness of where they're starting. So that's a huge part of it. And I like to see, then we can kind of get into the technical side here a little bit as far as just
Yeah.
setup stuff, but I like to see the armpits over the balls of the feet. Okay. And everybody's different with the length of their legs and their torso and how tall they are and their arm length and all that. But that's a pretty good starting point. So I see when I say tipped over, typically they're out in their toes and I'll put them on the plates and it's usually validated. I can see it on video pretty quick, but their armpits get out onto their toes too soon or too much. So that would be kind of setup stuff.
And
And then,
what do you see happens from those positions? What
yeah,
does
yeah.
that cause?
Right. So you'll see a decent amount of sort of linear movement in the backstroke where the hips will shift to the right and maybe they don't have enough rotation.
Okay.
Um, it's hard to explain, but they just don't move efficiently from that position, right?
Because they're not giving
So
themselves that platform to move from when they're, yeah.
exactly, yeah, yeah. Sometimes we don't have to understand all the details of why things happen, but it's just
Hmm.
like I see this pattern every time, and it's like the outcome is typically not good.
Okay.
So once we get them set up in those, and again, this is talking about ball on the ground stuff, right? I mean, with
Absolutely.
driver, it might be more
Yeah.
50-50 with the pressure. But for the most part, again, it's this affects like sweet spot control. You see people that are hitting it out of the heel too much. You'll see trail arm extension too early, things that cause shanking. These can all be easily fixed if you get their pressure in the right place
Mhm.
at the start. As far as like swing stuff that I'm seeing, probably decent amount of lateral shift into the trail side, but not enough rotation and not enough verticals, right, into the trail side. And I'll see like what Smart to Move talks about is like the point of contact with each foot is very, very important, right? So when they get into their trail side, when I say loaded properly, then that center of pressure is going to be somewhere in the middle of the foot to even slightly towards the heel a lot of times
Okay.
in a good swing.
Yeah.
In players that struggle or average golfers, it'll kind of hang in the toe, in the right toe at the top of the backswing, which makes it difficult to start to move pressure it makes it difficult to push in the right direction. We call that line of pressure. And also it makes it difficult to rotate, right? I always say the toes are great for jumping, but not real good for rotating, right? So
100%.
I'm pretty fanatical with how they load that trail foot, where they don't get on the outside of the trail foot, but they just have a balanced or sort of stability aspect to that trail side or the trail foot as they load. And of course, they have to have some rotation, right? So the pelvis is going to move a certain way. That trail hip is going to turn up and back, which kind of creates that, right? It's like
Mhm.
you can make them aware a lot of times of the resultant place that the pressure is and then how they get there, right? So it's like there's a difference. Like you can tell somebody to turn into their right heel, but it might not be the correct way, right? They might just like rock back into their heels. We want them to get there by the proper sequence of the trail hip turning and the torso rotating and the proper shoulder tilts and all that stuff that we enjoy. But that's a big one. So that trail side loading properly is good because then they can actually move into the lead side so that the average golfers don't get enough lateral into that lead side soon enough. If sometimes
100%.
they'll do it, yeah, it's like super late, right?
Hmm.
And then which creates less of an ability to use the verticals, right? So that's the big thing for me that I've learned with Smart to Move is how crucial that lead foot is in pushing up, which creates that AP force, which is the rotational aspect of the golf swing, right? It's the
Hmm.
anterior, posterior. So it's like that. You see me on my Instagram videos using the force pedal, give them a little
Hmm.
shout out. It's just a little spongy ball that goes under the lead ball of the foot. And you teach people that you have to start pushing down into that lead foot way super early in the backswing,
Yeah.
right? So there's a timing aspect of when the verticals are being applied. And ground is reacting. That's why they call it ground reaction forces. You have to push into the ground before the ground can push back, right?
Yeah.
So when we push into that lead foot, I get people they look at me with three heads when I say I need you to stand up sooner as opposed to staying down a lot of times.
I mean, told to stay down all their life, but it's,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Keep your head down. I mean, and there's some people that obviously are going to, come out of their posture, the dynamic posture. But for the most part, I get people to stand up sooner and rotate. And something I learned from John Tattersall is that, the club's pulling us towards the floor, right? So, I mean, there's 70 pounds of pressure that club is pulling us towards the ground. It's our job to get it out of the ground with our body, and it starts with our feet, right? So it's our connection to the ground with our feet is huge. So, that's a big thing that I work on, not just with the, low handicappers or my professionals, is a lot of times is getting people to learn what creates that lead side rotation. And most of it's the verticals. Like you're pushing up with that lead side, and I show them like, hey, you got to push from the left ball of the foot which, why does every good player roll their ankle on their finish? Looks like they're breaking their ankles, right? They're
Mhm.
not doing that on purpose. That's just so that lead knee and the lead hip can kind of get out of the way. And they don't, and why do the long drivers step back,
Yeah.
right? That's all vertical and rotational force that they're applying to the ground. So yeah, those are some of the things that I see that, good players do versus the average golfers.
So for those club players, because we were using a few different terms in there, a bit AP force, bit of verticals. So if we're saying, okay, well, why do you want me to push? Why am I pushing off my left foot? Why you tell me to do that? It really is the corresponding movements that creates. So when we're pushing off that lead side, that lead foot earlier in the swing, that vertical push off the ground creates a little bit more rotation in that lead side. The more
Right.
rotation creates a little bit of that stretch between the hand where the hands are, and creates a little bit more speed, a little bit more opening through. So all these
Yeah.
nice things start happening because of what we're working through on that lead foot. And a good friend of ours, Mark Bull, will always comment when you see someone with poor ground reaction forces, look to the left or the lead, excuse me, heel and foot first to see if
Yeah.
there's any issues there and how they're working through that side. So that's
Totally
really
agree.
fascinating stuff in terms of that. And, it's great that you have that system where you can put people on that, put them up on the screen, and we can match the movement with the visual. They're getting
Yeah.
the, oh, okay, well, so when I feel like I'm this, that's actually neutral, let's say. And when I feel like I'm this, okay, that's there. And then when I'm pushing here, I need to feel great, fantastic. So you're getting, I think it's important that we get that 3D feedback so we know what we're doing with the help of the player and the visual and combo those two things together, which is fantastic.
Yeah, you don't have to I mean, we're not saying you got to have like a perfectly straight left leg at impact.
No.
Like not all players do, but there has to be some pushing. If not, we start moving into the lead side and we keep going, right? There's no
Mhm.
braking system, right? Which causes a lot of the energy to get out to the club. I mean, all these little things are sort of that down the chain stuff really helps. Everybody comes to us and wants to do what? They want to swing faster and hit it farther. And again, I'm not trying to like say we have to have a lot more speed to play better golf all the time. You still have to be able to hit it out of the center of the club face and be able to control your golf ball. But
Mhm.
these are the things that help the body move to, I think, improve impact and then, help you to hit it more solid because guys or ladies are hitting it fat or thin because of a lot of things they're trying to do, which is stay down too long or, they're trying to open up, but they don't really know how to do it properly.
For sure, for sure.
Mm.
From a student perspective, and this is kind of a way that they could maybe help themselves in lessons. So anybody getting lessons right now, and as they go into a lesson, what's something that you've seen this year in terms of something that a student did you hadn't seen before, or some way they acted, or some action they took, even away from the lesson tee that you were like, damn, if I could email all my students to do this, this would either be, and it can be both ways. It can be, that would be amazing, or damn, this student did this. And I was like, never do that again. That is, please don't do that again.
Oh
Any,
man.
any thoughts around that?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, because everybody's an individual, right? I mean, we see something different because
Mm,
we're dealing with different personalities, body types. I would just say because we get so many students that come to us confused, right? And not to badmouth any other coaches because everybody's trying their best and giving them what they think they need,
absolutely.
but a lot of times they get the wrong prescription or on their own, a self-sabotage by either watching a video that probably was a great video on YouTube or Instagram that maybe wasn't applicable to their problem or what they needed. I think, if I had to email everybody, it's like just figure out your why, right? It's like, okay, when you say you're going to do this, like I had a student today, it was a great example. I 22 handicapper, first time I've ever seen him. And he told me that, well, this previous coach that he had or whatever is telling me I needed to rotate more and this and that. And I was like, okay, I'm in my head, I'm going, yeah, that's probably what you need to do. You're not, he thought he was limited to how he was going to be able to swing. And I changed something different, which was he was super steep. He went from like 7 or 8 left with his club path, hitting kind of weak fades and pulls. In 30 minutes, well, I got him to like 4 or 5 to the right, and he was hitting draws and like little pull draws, which was great because he picked up distance. And he repeated back to me, he's like, "Yeah, certain thing in the backswing was exactly or pretty close to like how I used to swing. I'm like, okay, well that's where we need to be clearly. And he was like, he thought I was a magician or something. I'm like, no, I mean, it takes some layers to kind of, ask the proper questions and get the right answers to like what that player is going to do because everybody's different.
Hmm.
And it kind of changed his world as far as like his perspective on what he really needed to do. So it's like you've got to figure out the why when you're making a change, right? It's not just
Yeah.
because it looks like a tour player, or it looks like something because they're average golfers have their own lens of like what they think a golf swing should look like, which is different than my lens, different than your lens, because we've got more knowledge of how to put the pieces together for each player, right? So
Hmm.
that's the tricky part about our job. But I think when the average golfer can get some clarity and say, all right, because this guy, he hadn't really had that many lessons, which was kind of interesting. I always ask that question is like, have you had lessons? And when they say they haven't had that many lessons, I always got to talk them through sort of the process of like, all right, we've got to feel uncomfortable because change is uncomfortable. You've got to be able to embrace that. And he told me, he's like, I'm cool to do that as long as I know that this is going to make me better.
Yeah.
Right. And that as soon as we did that, and then we were on the same page and then we were off and running. And here he is hitting draws 30 minutes later, which is doesn't always happen, right? But it's cool when it does.
Yeah.
Right?
It's nice.
So yeah, so he has a perfect understanding and some clarity of what his changes are, why, and then where's that going to take me, right? Because that's going to help him to reach his goal of whatever, getting to a 15,
Mhm.
right? So it's like that's the thing. I think if you got and you got to dig deep with that. I think that students out there need to do a better job of asking better questions
Yeah.
from the coach,
Yeah.
right? So it's like it's our job to like give you the information, but we can't just we do our best to pull out the information that you have. And a lot of people don't know how to articulate what they're trying to do, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
fair. It'd just be like us trying to learn another sport or another skill. If you don't have any knowledge of it, then that's fine. But when you have all this other stuff that sort of is clogging up uh, your goal of like getting better and it's the wrong stuff,
Yeah.
then we're trying to pull that out and like push it to the side and say, okay, well, this is really the couple things that we need to do because this is what's going to happen and this is
Hmm.
why. And then we've got the measurement devices to like show them like this guy was super into the data. So I'm like, you don't need to know all this stuff. I just basically gave him a 5-minute tutorial on ball flight. So he understood D plane fairly well in the first 5 minutes of the lesson. He goes, this is perfect. Like, so I need to make that number go over here. I'm like, yeah. So this is going to measure our feel. Cause I told him feel and real is a very long bridge sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to make that bridge a little smaller for you. And he got it really quick. And he was excited. He's like, man, I went from -7 to +4, and look what my golf ball's doing. And now I sort of understand why, and this is what I need to feel. And that's a successful golf lesson, right? So I don't know if that
Yeah. No,
answered the
absolutely.
question in a
No,
long-winded
absolutely.
way, but yeah, we can go
I
down that.
think it's not in a negative way. It's not putting the onus back on the customers, so to speak. But I'm always looking at ways. Okay, well, I know you work the same way. When somebody comes to me, this is a team effort. We're
Yeah,
trying to attain the
100%.
same goal here. You
Yeah.
do well, I do well. Everybody does well. We're all happy. So how can we all work to make this better? And I think definitely players coming in and going, okay, why? Asking, wanting to understand it. I think we thrive off that as coaches. If you get inquisitive with me, I love it, right? And
Yeah,
I had a player this
100%.
year, same situation as you, just maybe smaller when you were talking about the ball flight laws, where we had a lesson and he'd never heard of them, wasn't aware of them, and we didn't go through the whole lot of them. We just
No, just
worked on
path
a
face.
specific one,
Yeah, I mean,
and
that's a
then the
good
next
place to
section,
start.
next session he came back. He goes, I want to show you something. And he started off the lesson for the first 10 minutes and went through all the ball flight laws. He'd gone off and studied them because he wanted to learn and he
Love
wanted,
that
and
guy.
that's the first time I've seen someone do that, actively go away and learn off their own accord.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought that was really, really fantastic. And, then he came back and he had a great understanding. And I was like, hey, so you see this data tile here? And he's like, yeah, I know exactly what that would do that to that. Beautiful. And now
Yeah.
that makes me more energized. So it's always interesting talking to coaches about those students that they see that, do those fun things outside of it, or just put that little bit of extra effort in. And then I can tell you this, if you're a student listening to this, if you do that, we're so much more in. Like we're already fully in, but if you do that too, like we'll go above and beyond to help players that are going above and beyond to help themselves.
Yeah, because we have plenty of players that come in thinking they know more than the coach. All right.
Never happened to me.
Right. I mean, it's like and those are the roadblocks we deal with.
Yeah.
I would say, you can be an open-minded learner, or you can be a dirt in a cup. Right, from the old Zen philosopher analogy. But I mean, it's like you got to be open-minded. And hey, we all make bad calls. I've made them, you've made them. I mean, it happens, but
Yeah.
we're going to work through it together, because I've got plenty of other tools in the toolbox. As long as we know the direction we're going, we're going to figure it out eventually. So it's the ones that come in that want to argue with you. Like, are you sure this is right? I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, this is like my 32nd year of trying this stuff. I mean, I didn't just make it up, right? It's like,
Yeah, I am trying
I'm
to
pretty
get you
sure.
there. Yeah.
Pretty sure. Yeah, it was funny. Not to go off on too many tangents, as you know. Well, but yeah, he came in. He didn't have a clue who I was or my reputation or whatever, which
Mhm.
is fine. And he saw my logo or whatever. He goes, "So what makes you the guru?" I'm like, "That is a fantastic question."
How long have we got?
Right? It was cool. Like, we had a great time. So it was,
Nice.
yeah, 30 minutes of like talking and 30 minutes of actually helping them. And so, yeah. All
But
right.
I think what some people don't understand too, about learning golf is it's not like you get a new swing and suddenly the old motor pattern that existed just dissipates and disappears.
Right.
It's you're putting layers upon layers upon layers. So what you learn first becomes the baseline, and then you're supplementing new movements on top of that.
Yep.
Right? It just doesn't. So sometimes, as you mentioned earlier on, sometimes the best way is for us as coaches. You've just got too much shit supplemented on top of what you was originally pretty damn good. So
Right.
sometimes it's about just stripping that shit away that you've been told that just isn't true. Um, and getting to the root and go, okay, well, you know what? That base thing you had was pretty decent, but let's go this route now. And let's go the right way, and we'll assess, and whether it's like using force plates, whether it's using TrackMan, whether it's using 3D,
Yeah.
whatever, and let's put a plan in place. And I think then you have the buy-in from the player because they know you're not full of shit, which is obviously very, very important.
Yeah. Presence, as we talked about before. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's establishing,
Um,
because we are the experts. It's just, we don't have to
yeah.
tell them everything we know, but we need to get reasonable results fairly quickly to get that buy-in for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I got I don't know whether we mentioned this at the start, but I did get the chance to hang out with you last year. It is now. God, time flies, doesn't it?
It has.
And it was you organized some nice Irish rainy weather for me, which I really, really
I
appreciated.
know.
And my wife did too. That was
Not
her kind of
normally
like,
like that.
yeah, that's a kind of like semi honeymoon. But I was really, really impressed with the way you went around helping your players. Because as coaches, or I know myself when I go to watch other coaches, my brain's going, right, and I'm thinking I would do
Sure.
this, I would do that, and there was some big changes I would have made to some players, and you didn't do that. You worked around it and helped them, and it was really, really good. Like I really enjoyed the time. Probably the most interesting aspect was the putting. And just because of the way I've learned and the way my development education has gone, I haven't really spent a
Hmm.
whole lot of time on putting. Um, so I was really interested in that and a lot of the concepts that you were talking about, a little bit like aiming kind of points and all these break points and discussions. So it was really good, very educational. Um, can we give the listeners an overall understanding of what your process is like in assessing putting and some principles that you work on that they could take to the putting green themselves, maybe help themselves in learning or assessing their own stroke in action?
Yeah. So we're still in the
We're
player
we're still on the club golfer
section.
side of
Yeah,
things.
the club
Yeah.
go. Okay, yeah.
And then
So,
we're gonna well, what we can do is say, okay, let's start off with how would you or what would you recommend club players look at when looking or
yeah,
assessing their own strokes? Because a lot of them will default to the stroke. Oh, I'm putting shit. What's wrong with my stroke? Might not
yeah,
be the stroke. So maybe, ways to assess that first. And then we'll just creep nicely after that into the technical side of things, into the coaching side of things, and talk about. I know you're going to present on this at the top 100, so maybe we might
right.
we might slide into that, whatever you want to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
there.
yeah. I'll kind of give it the cliff notes, which again, it always surprises my members, or the amateur golfers, when they come to see me, I'll give them a nice full swing lesson and got 10 minutes left. And they're like, "Oh, can you look at my putting?" I'm like, "Sure." But I mean, what are we really
Yeah,
doing? Right. It's like, yeah,
I can
like, well,
glance.
how long should I book? And I'm like, well, when a tour player comes to see me, or like a really competitive player, like it's a minimum of 2 hours, if
Mhm.
not three, if we're really going to do it right. So they look at me like a little bit crazy. But clearly, you've got to adapt, and I've got to give a lot of 30-minute to half or to hour putting lessons. So I think most of the average golfers spend too much time on their stroke and not enough time on break prediction and or just picturing the the path of the ball or the putt
Okay.
and or working on their touch, right? So
Right.
I break my coaching into basically what I call three skill buckets. Like one is the stroke. I use like a calibration station, which is whether it's a Visio mat or whatever training aid you prefer. I like the Visio mat. As far as like a start line piece ish, like that, we'd call that stroke mechanics. And then skill bucket two would be more the feel and touch and what I call picture stuff. And I think most golfers should spend more time in that skill bucket two than skill bucket one. Not that the stroke pattern and all that isn't important, because it is, but I think you can improve a lot faster if one, you work on your touch, and two, you work on your green reading. So I always start, and I'll give some application here, I promise. So I always start a lesson, if I have a little bit of time, if we have more than 10 minutes, with just a simple drill with can you stop the ball where you want to stop it, right? So I'll throw a poker chip out on the green, or put a ball mark on the green or something, and I'll start them out like 6 feet, and then I'll go to like 15 feet, and then I'll go to like 30 feet, and I'll move around the green a little bit to give them different breaks in different situations and change the environment, and just sort of sit back and watch for patterns, right? So are they missing it low and short? Are they missing it high? What's going on? How tight is that cluster of 4 or 5 balls that I give them? Um, I'm a big fan of doing more drills without an actual golf hole than with the hole. So I use ghost
Interesting.
holes. Yeah, I use, again, just putting to a tee or whatever. I like the poker chip because you can see it pretty easily, even when you're far away. And it's something I learned from John Graham years ago, one of my good friends and mentors in putting. But everything basically is built backwards, right? So I call it reverse engineering the problem. So I'll get people to do that, and they really don't know what they're doing aside from like, I'm just stop the ball here, stop the ball here. And then I say, okay, well, that's not actually the hole. That's just where the ball would end up if the hole disappeared, right? So then we sort of build that picture backwards and start to test their green reading. So I'll throw a ghost hole out there. I'll even sometimes have them place the hole where they think the hole should be, which totally, did I do that with you,
You
with
did,
my
yeah. That
guy?
was one of the ones I
Yeah.
loved. Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
one that I'm kind of working on the language to like explain this to people, because I've seen them put it in various positions because they don't understand the instructions.
yeah.
But basically, it's if the hole was in the way, on the way to the
The
poker
poker
chip,
chip. Yeah.
yeah, that's where the hole should be. And but so also we're getting some insight into the player's perspective of how they see the putt, right? So I
Mm.
always say so much of great putters are very observant and they're very visual, because they have a good picture of, I mean, we've heard it all the way back to like Tiger Woods, picture, putt to the picture. Like, what does
Yeah.
that mean? Well, he's seeing, and Jack Nicklaus even said, I see a movie. I don't pull the trigger until the movie's finished, right? So all these things kind of lead us to clues of what the successful putters always did, regardless of their stroke type. I think probably 80% of poor putting, or with the average golfer, they're just trying to three putt or four putt less, right? It's like not always about making more putts. It's like, can we have, some more three putt avoidance? So touch is a great place to start.
Okay.
And then we kind of build the picture backwards. And like what you were talking about is depending on the level of player, I'll build that picture back with some ball marks, or some lines and so forth, to where the last third of the putt I think is super, super important. Something I learned from Mark Sweeney from Aimpoint years ago was what we call drop point, which is the point on the curve that's halfway in between the apex of the putt and the hole and the entry point. So even what we found is even when the player knows the exact answer of like where they think the ball needs to start, where the aim point is, and so forth, that a lot of times in their head they will picture too much curve. So that's why you see a lot of good players will actually miss it high a lot of times when they're putting poorly because they're not seeing the curve flat enough in that last third, part of the putt. So I actually
Yeah.
there's a way that you can figure that out, which I can't really explain on the podcast probably, but you can put that in. I'll put a ball mark in there, and so we start experimenting on what players how their awareness is and how they react to the picture. So I'll put the entire anatomy of a putt out there, which would be like start line, apex, drop point, entry point, intent, and we'll just mess around with it, and then I'll start taking things away, right? And then you start measuring and sort of seeing what the outcomes are, and you'll eventually find what works best for that player. I've had people that putt great just thinking about visualizing the entry point. I've had people putt great or players putt great just looking at intention, and I've had more analytical, linear type thinkers that want to know where they're trying to aim exactly, right? So it's like you got to figure that out. So every player is a little bit different, but that's not enough players, in my opinion, whether it's even my tour players, a lot of times don't practice that kind of stuff enough. They just sit there and
Yeah.
roll putts. They either go in or they don't. And I don't think that's really a good recipe for putting performance, increasing putting performance. I think you have to have some awareness of like what the ball is actually doing. I call it the 11 or the 7 seconds of reflection. It's like when that ball leaves the putter, figure out, where did that thing stop? Where did it start? How much curve was there? What was the outcome? That way you're not going down the rabbit hole of going, oh, it's my stroke. My stroke is shit. It's not,
Yeah.
it's a lot less of that. And there's start line issues. I mean, again, I use Sam Putt Lab daily. I'm working on trying to get people to square it up and start it in the right place more consistently. That is not what I'm saying. It's not important, but I think the low hanging fruit lies in the touch and the picture stuff.
Yeah, I really like that, what you're talking about there, because I think that's the pure definition of developing a skill. When you look
100%.
at that and you're giving them the platform, the opportunity to start learning it themselves. You're not, forcing them into, okay, well, you got to aim here, you got to aim on this put you're actually saying, okay, well, I'm going to lay out the picture, lay out the canvas for you. You just tell me what you see. And
Yeah.
okay, let's add a little piece here, let's take a little piece away there. And you go back to what you said at the very, very start. You were like, if I can get them to understand, if their intention and their understanding and their concepts change. So I know I've been through that process, and I remember being in Stevie Sweeney's studio, and he's like, hit a putt here. I'm like, okay, I'll aim there. And he goes, right, you're aiming 50 feet left. And where do you think this is going to break? And I was way off. And, and I'm a good putter, so it didn't really bother to me. But, my concept, my visual of how I saw everything was completely arseways, right? So,
Yeah.
when we're getting those club golfers, and for me, from my perspective, what you mentioned, the 3-putt avoidance is probably the number one question I get asked at a putting session is, hey, I just 3-putt a lot and it's my stroke. Like, well, can you read greens? I'm not great. Okay, well, how do
They
we
all
do?
think they're better than they are too.
Yeah, so how do we develop that skill? And that's a really, really great way of doing it. So if you're a club golfer listening, just get out some poker chips, start putting down just some random place on the green. And then once you put to that poker chip and you start hitting that poker chip, where would you put the hole? Maybe about a foot back from that poker chip. Where would you have that hole that if the ball hit the poker chip, it would run through the hole in the middle of the hole? I think it's definitely a fun way of looking at it. In terms of the feel and the pace, is there any of your favorite go-to drills for players working on that? Are you, more of that, hey, I want you to learn what 5, 10, 15, 20 feet feels like at your home course? Or
Hmm.
are you not totally Bryson X, or are you more, what, I want you creating, I know on the stack system, there's nearly a 20-putt system where they're all variable, right? There's a 4-foot downhill or left to right and
Hmm.
10-foot uphill or right to left. If you have tour players and you're giving them some guidance to work on feel and touch, is it a much more varied layout, or is it more block entailed?
Yeah, I would say starting with the mechanics of it, what we've figured out, and people that use Sam Putt Lab out there already know this, but most of the patterns with the acceleration profile versus the speed is the poor putters tend to over accelerate. Now, again, you can say that as a blanket statement. Like there's been some over accelerators that putt pretty good, if they're highly skilled, but
Hmm.
I always look deeper into it is like, why are they doing that? And the reason is typically the backstroke doesn't change length,
Hmm.
okay, with your average players. So
Yeah.
getting them to comfortably take the putter back faster or longer, which would hope to create a little smoother, more coasting type feeling through impact, is really the mechanical changes that I tend to make when players are struggling with speed or distance.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I tons of drills for speed, but I like to basically use variability more than probably blocked. So I'll use just a simple leapfrog drill where we'll set up, a ball mark at 6 feet and a ball mark at 12 feet, and I'll have them hit putts to, try to get it past that first ball mark. And then every putt has to go a little bit farther. So they're having to basically adapt and change the putter speed and ball speed for every putt. If it's short, then you have to start over. Or if it goes past the 12-foot barrier, then you have to start over. So, and you can do that backwards as well. So I
Hmm.
use a lot of those, and I'll use a sort of a different version of the poker chip drill too. Is I will throw out three poker chips in like different level or different locations of the green, and I'll have them set up and hit them with very little time in between each putt. So they have to sort of adapt really quickly. So
Hmm.
they don't get to sit there and read it and look at it or whatever. I just want them to hit it, and I want them to look at the outcome. Then I want to turn and hit the middle one, and then turn and hit to the one up to the right. So I think adaptability is a lot of a lot of what's overlooked, I think, in putting as well. Yeah, just a lot of stuff like that. And I'll have them hit downhill and uphill putts where I'll have them vary the intention, like whether it's 6 inches past, a foot past, or 3 foot past, using a ghost hole, to where they've got to decide. Again, all we're trying to do is one, you have to, going back to the intent, is like you have to have an intent on how far you want this ball to roll,
Hmm.
and then marry that up with whatever breakthrough is, right? Because there's multiple solutions to every putt problem,
Yeah.
especially when we're dealing with breaking putts, right? There's a
Yeah.
big cone of variability and options that we have there, right? So if you decide that you're trying to hit it firmer, then you got to play a lower line, right? I mean, that's an option. It's not bad.
Hmm.
I mean, we bring three putt avoidance maybe into it, but I mean, getting people to just think through that part of it is why touch is so important. Like if you can get your touch down and then start to have a decent idea of, predicting slope and predicting break, I mean, the stroke is not that hard.
Yeah. You're
It's
you're
like the
halfway there
rest
to
of it's,
not three
yeah,
putting. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. You
Yeah.
don't have to have a perfect stroke. I'd rather be a better green reader and have an average stroke than have like a perfect stroke and can't read a green. Think
Yeah,
about
and I know,
that.
yeah, I know Sasho came out a couple of years ago with some data in terms of the influence of path versus face aim and impact. And the face aim and impact, I think, was 92, 93%. The path was maybe two or three. It was very minimal
Yeah.
compared to the
Right.
belief that's out there of the influence of it. Um, we mentioned setup earlier on in the full game and using the force plates to look at pressure. Is there anything in setup for putting that you see is prevalent among club golfers where you see them going wrong? Pressure obviously not being as influential because there's not as much
Mm,
movement, but
yeah, it
I
can
know
be.
I know eye orientation gets discussed quite a lot in terms of being
Hmm.
inside the line, outside the line, and that's more of a personal how people see things because we all see things differently in arcs. Is there anything that jumps out to you? You know what? I'm always looking at that. Like, is something even as simple as ball position? Where do you feel that should be located to get that if you're looking for that more upward strike?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we all have preferences, right? But again,
Mm-hmm.
we like to back those preferences up with data. And if we're just again going like reverse engineering the problem, one of the if you think ball roll is important, which I think it is, my guy Will McGirt on the PGA Tour, it's like he thinks that's the most important thing in putting is getting the ball to roll end over end. Now,
Mm-hmm.
from a teacher standpoint, I'm like, there's a lot more to that, but having a proper launch and having good roll is important, right? So what you're alluding to there is we want to have enough rise where the putter, I've not coached any good putter that hits down on the ball yet. I mean, it's one of the things you can kind of go and eliminate some of the things that just don't happen for good putters. They don't hit
Yeah.
down on the ball, so they're all hitting up on it, which means that the ball position needs to be somewhere in the forward half of the stance.
Mm.
I think every player is going to be a little bit different, but I try to get through a lot of testing and just basically figuring it out through a lot of putts is figuring out where their ball position needs to be in order for them to aim it properly and also to get that launch condition. And then I'll measure, every player is a little bit different, but I'll measure my players from their left big toe to the golf ball,
Hmm.
whatever that is. And then I'll measure from their left big toe, sideways to get their ball position. So when they go and set up their calibration station, like Will's a 10-inch 4-inch. So he
Yeah.
has a little mark on his alignment stick to where when he goes to practice, he puts down 10-4 and he sets himself up every single time.
Love that.
That's one of the things that I think even good players can get off a little bit. I think he had gotten too far from the ball a couple years ago, and I got him a little closer, and I'm like, we figured out exactly where he needed to be and where he putted the best, and then we just measured it with a tape. So, but having the ball forward in the stance is important because we're trying to basically we're measuring loft versus rise, right? So we have to have enough rise angle to hit up on it slightly, but we also don't want to be adding loft to the putter. So we want more rise than there is effective loft of the putter at impact that creates what we call top spin roll on Sam Putt Lab. So yeah,
What
some
launch
forward
what
half is
launch
good.
roughly are you looking for when you're looking at players? Maybe 2 degrees or something around that, or is
Yeah, two to three ish. I mean,
okay.
I honestly don't even look at that number as much as I just want to see what the ball does, right? So
Okay.
um, and it's easy. I just look at the top spin versus new. I mean, neutral's okay.
Hmm.
A lot of times that's the one thing on Sam Putt Lab that I might question sometimes. So I'll even get on the ground with a iPhone and a camera and like put it down on the ground and watch the ball come off. Like I don't have Quintic. That would be like the ultimate, like if you wanted to really see
They,
what the
they
ball
do
was
have an app
doing.
now. I'll give
I
them a
know.
little plug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw that. I need
Yeah.
to probably get on that. That would be the ultimate if you have Sam and you got the Quintic, so you wouldn't miss
It's
anything.
like the
But
TrackMan and quad of the putting world.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, it's just, I mean, somewhere forward. I mean, if I start like a new golfer or just an average golfer, I'll start with like a putter head, measuring a putter head from their left or their front big toe,
Mhm.
towards the middle of their stance. That's a good place to start because that puts you a few inches ahead of center.
Beautiful.
And then you can kind of adjust based on
Yeah.
whatever. Because if you move it back more, then they're going to tend to aim more right. If you move it forward more, they tend to aim left. So you got to kind of figure that out. And then as far as like the eye position, again, it's a preference, but it's also there's some function behind it. I like to see the eyes generally on the inside edge of the ball. I don't like to see it on the middle or the outside, primarily because like, aside from somebody with just a super long torso, then the arms tend to get trapped in their sides. They don't have enough room. So one of the big things with my setup keys is I want the arms to be able to be in front of their body.
Okay.
They can be connected, but I want them to be in front of the body so they can swing freely. So I find if they get too close to it because their eyes are trying to get over the ball or they mistakenly get outside the ball, now they're jammed up and they're a little bit trapped. And then
Interesting.
little bad things happen. Yep.
Yeah. I really, really like it's something I've done previously for chipping is creating little just putting kind of tape on alignment sticks. Okay, where's the best place? And not even if it's the best place, but just that you're doing the same thing again and again. So every time, as you said, you go practicing your putting, just put 2 sticks down. You're hitting it from the same spot every single
Yeah.
time.
It's simple, right? I
What's
mean,
the
it seems like
one
it.
word everybody says to us when they get on the range? I want to be more consistent.
Consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's take the consistency and do it in the learning.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of variability because again, one of those questions, hey, just can't take my range game to the golf course. I'm like, well, you're looking at it completely the wrong way. You should be replicating what happens on the golf course on the range because that's what we
Mm.
really want to do, right? So we need to create that variability on our practice and our learning that we encounter on the golf course. So that's why I like what you said there about the variability of it, creating as much, challenge the player how they adapt to certain situations. And there's
Yeah.
there's a time and a place for block stuff, obviously, but my
No,
preference is for a little bit
100%.
of that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, with my skill buckets, I always say, maximum 10 to 15 minutes in that station.
Mm.
Don't sit there for an hour.
Yeah.
You can get it through the
Change it up.
gate, and then but it's more of like it calibrates the stroke and
Mhm.
also gives them confidence that okay, yeah, my start line stuff's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to like what's the meat of my practice, which should be your touch and your picture stuff.
Fantastic.
All right, everyone. So that's it for part one. Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Make sure to put on the automatic downloads on whatever platform you listen to the podcast through so you don't miss out on part two, which will be out next week.